The coffee was still lukewarm when I pulled up to the drive-through window of my newest location in Riverside. I'd been doing surprise inspections all week, checking on quality control and customer service standards across my restaurant chain. What I didn't expect was to see my father's face appear in the window, wearing the signature burgundy uniform of Sunrise Kitchens, holding my order with trembling hands. "Your Mediterranean bowl and green tea, ma'am." "That'll be." His voice died as our eyes met. The man who'd called me worthless, who'd thrown my belongings onto the lawn 5 years ago, stood frozen with my credit card reader in his hand. "Hello, Dad," I said calmly, though my heart was racing. "I'll pay with card." The reader slipped from his fingers, clattering onto the counter. Behind him, I could see other employees glancing over, sensing the tension. His face had aged a decade in 5 years. Deep lines carved by what looked like hard living, his once proud shoulders hunched in the polyester uniform shirt. "Sophia," he whispered. Is that really you?" "It's Ms. Martinez to employees," I said, holding out my black card. "And you're holding up the line." His hands shook as he processed the payment. The receipt printed with a mechanical whir that seemed deafening in the silence between us. When he handed it to me, I noticed his wedding ring was gone. "Would you like to apply for manager?" I asked, the words coming out before I could stop them. "We're always looking for experienced staff." That's when he broke. The man who'd never shown emotion except anger, who'd ruled our household with an iron fist and impossible standards, began to cry at the drive-through window of my restaurant. "Please," he choked out. "Can we talk?" "You're on shift," I replied. "That would be unprofessional. Have a great day." I drove forward, my food untouched on the passenger seat, my hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. In the rearview mirror, I could see him still standing at the window, tears streaming down his face. 5 years. It had been 5 years since the night that changed everything. I was 21, 3 years into my business degree at State University, when I realized I was dying inside. Every lecture about corporate hierarchies and traditional business models felt like another nail in the coffin of my dreams. I wasn't built for a cubicle. I was built to build. The food truck idea had come to me during a particularly boring economics class. Healthy, affordable, internationally inspired bowls served fast. Food that wouldn't make you feel guilty or broke. I'd spent months researching, planning, calculating. I'd saved every penny from my part-time jobs, lived on instant noodles to fund my dream. When I told my parents I was dropping out to start a food truck business, you'd have thought I'd announced I was joining a cult. "Absolutely not," Dad had said, not even looking up from his newspaper. "No daughter of mine is throwing away her education to sell tacos from a van. It's not tacos, it's healthy fusion cuisine." "It's stupidity," he'd cut me off. "You'll be back in 6 months, begging to return to school. Except by then, you'll have lost your scholarships and any chance at a real future." This is my real future. I've done the research, I have a business plan. You have nothing. He'd stood then, all 6'2" of him towering over me. You have a child's fantasy about playing restaurant. You think you're special? You think you're different? You're just another dropout statistic waiting to happen. At least I'm trying something. All you do is complain about your factory job while doing nothing to change it. That's when I'd crossed the line. Nobody talked about Dad's job, how he'd been passed over for promotion year after year, how he'd watched younger men rise while he stayed on the floor. His face had turned purple. "Get out," he'd screamed. "You worthless waste. You want to throw your life away? Do it somewhere else. You're not my daughter anymore." "Frank, please." Mom had tried to intervene. "No. She made her choice. Let her live with it. Get out." I'd packed what I could carry. Mom had slipped me $200 when Dad wasn't looking, tears in her eyes but no words of defense. My younger brother, Carlos, had hugged me at the door. "You're really leaving?" he'd asked. "I'm really starting," I'd replied. Dad had stood in the doorway as I loaded my car. "When you fail, and you will fail, don't come crawling back here. This door is closed to you. When I succeed," I'd said, finding courage I didn't know I had, "I won't want to come back." His last words to me were, "Success? You'll be lucky to avoid homelessness. Worthless dreamer, just like your grandmother." Grandma Elena, who'd run a small restaurant until she died, who Dad had always resented for filling my head with foolish ideas. He'd meant it as the ultimate insult. I'd taken it as the ultimate compliment. The first year almost killed me. I'd used my savings and Mom's secret gift to buy a beaten-down food truck from a failed business. I'd taught myself to repair it through YouTube videos, sleeping in it most nights because I couldn't afford rent. I'd learned about permits and licenses the hard way, through rejection after rejection. Sunrise kitchens, named after the dawn I saw every morning through the windshield, promising another day to prove him wrong. I'd started with one menu item, Mediterranean power bowls. Quinoa, grilled vegetables, lean proteins, house-made sauces. Healthy food for people on the go who were tired of choosing between fast and nutritious. I'd parked outside gyms at 5 a.m., office buildings at lunch, college campuses at dinner. 18-hour days. Burns from the grill. Nights when I counted quarters to buy ingredients for the next day. Food poisoning from eating expired ingredients I couldn't afford to waste. There were times I understood why Dad thought I'd fail. Times I thought he might be right. But every morning, I'd see that sunrise and remember. Worthless people don't watch the sun rise from their own business. Dreamers who work become achievers who succeed. The breakthrough came 8 months in. A local food blogger tried my bowl on a whim, posted about it on Instagram. Finally, fast food that doesn't hate your body, she'd written. The post went viral in our city. The next day, I had lines around the block. The day after that, I ran out of food by noon. Within a month, I was clearing more profit than I'd ever imagined. But I didn't stop there. I saved every penny, lived like I was still broke, reinvested everything. 1 truck became 2. 2 became 5. By year 2, I had my first brick-and-mortar location. The expansion was methodical, careful. I refused to take shortcuts or compromise quality. Every location had to meet my standards: fresh ingredients, living wages for employees, healthy options that actually tasted good. I turned down franchise offers that would have made me rich but diluted the brand. By year 3, Sunrise Kitchens had 20 locations across 3 states. By year 4, we'd won awards for both our food and our employee treatment policies. By year 5, I was looking at 100 locations and a valuation that made my college debt look like pocket change. And now, in year 5, my father was serving me food through a drive-through window. I pulled into a parking spot and sat there, staring at the meal I couldn't eat. Through the window, I could see him continuing to serve customers, but his movements were mechanical, distracted. Every few orders, he'd glance toward the parking lot. My phone buzzed. Carlos. Sophia, holy shit, is that you in the parking lot? Dad just told me you came through the drive-through. Carlos worked at this location too. I'd hired him 2 years ago when he'd reached out after graduating high school. He was one of my best assistant managers, though I'd made him earn it like any other employee. Yeah, it's me. He's freaking out. Like, completely losing it. He had no idea you own this place. None of us told him. How long has he worked here? 3 months. He got laid off from the factory. Mom left him last year. Couldn't take his anger anymore. He's been living in a studio apartment, working wherever he could. I closed my eyes. The man who'd valued stability above all else, reduced to working fast food in his 50s. He's a good worker, Carlos continued. Never complains, always on time. It's weird seeing him so humble. Does he know you're my brother? No. I use Mom's maiden name here, like you suggested. He has no idea. I watched through the window as my father handed another order to a customer, forcing a smile that looked physically painful. The man who'd screamed about worthlessness, now serving food at a restaurant built by the daughter he'd thrown away. I'll be in the office, I told Carlos. Don't tell him. I entered through the employee entrance, nodding at staff who straightened up when they recognized me. The office was small but organized, with monitors showing all the operational metrics I tracked obsessively. An hour later, there was a knock on the door. I knew who it would be. Come in. Dad entered slowly, having changed out of his uniform into street clothes. He looked smaller than I remembered, deflated. The angry giant of my memories replaced by a broken man who couldn't meet my eyes. Sophia, he started, then stopped. I mean, Ms. Martinez. Thank you for seeing me. Sit. He perched on the edge of the chair like he might need to run. I didn't know this was your company. The name is different, and I never asked about the owner. Would it have mattered if you knew? I wouldn't have applied, he admitted. Too ashamed. But not too ashamed to take a paycheck from the worthless daughter you disowned? He flinched. I was wrong. About everything. Were you wrong when you kicked me out? Or just wrong about my chances of success? Both. All of it. He looked up finally, and I saw something I'd never seen in his eyes before. Genuine remorse. I've read about you. Once Carlos let slip that you were doing well, I looked you up. $500 million valuation. fastest growing restaurant chain in America, awards for ethical business practices. And my worthless daughter is worth more than I'll make in 10 lifetimes. My dreamer daughter employs thousands of people. My failure of a daughter succeeded beyond anything I could imagine. I was never worthless, I said quietly. You just couldn't see my worth because it didn't match your definition. I know that now. I knew it when Sunrise Kitchens started appearing everywhere, when I realized the healthy food empire I'd been reading about was built by the daughter I'd thrown away. I knew it when your mother left me, saying she couldn't forgive how I'd treated you. I knew it when I lost my job and realized I'd spent 30 years being safe and had nothing to show for it. And now you work for me. The irony isn't lost on me. He attempted a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The universe has a sense of humor. The universe didn't fill out your job application. No, I did that. I needed work, and Sunrise Kitchens pays better than anywhere else. I didn't know this was one of your locations until today. I leaned back in my chair, studying him. What do you want from me, Dad? Forgiveness? Money? A promotion? I want nothing, he said, surprising me. I deserve nothing. I just wanted to say I'm sorry, and that I'm proud of you, and that you were right to leave. I didn't leave. I was thrown out. Best thing I ever did for you, apparently. His laugh was bitter, though I can't even take credit for that. I thought I was punishing you. Instead, I freed you. Freed me. The anger I'd buried for 5 years surfaced. You called me worthless. You said I'd be homeless. You chose your pride over your daughter. Yes, he said simply. All true. And you proved me wrong by becoming everything I said you couldn't be. I didn't do it to prove you wrong. I did it to spite you. I know. That's what makes it worse. You didn't need me. You never did. We sat in silence. Through the office window, I could see the dinner rush starting, employees moving with the efficient choreography I'd trained them in. My empire, built from nothing but determination and dawn sunrises. Are you going to fire me? He asked finally. No. Carlos says you're a good worker. I don't fire good workers for personal reasons. That's more than I deserve. Yes, it is. I stood, signaling the end of our meeting. But Sunrise Kitchens believes in second chances. You'll keep your job if you want it. Work hard, treat your colleagues with respect, and you can build a future here. Under my daughter's company. Under a company that values effort over ego. That rewards hard work, not hard words. That sees worth in people, not just their credentials. He stood too, moving toward the door, then paused. The offer for a manager position. Were you mocking me? No. We promote from within based on merit. Prove yourself, and opportunities will come. That's how it works here. For everyone. Even for fathers who failed their daughters. Especially for them. Redemption is harder than success. But it's possible. He nodded and reached for the door handle. Sophia? Could we maybe have coffee sometime? Not as boss and employee. Just as people. I thought about all the mornings I'd drunk coffee alone in my food truck. Wishing I had a father who believed in me. All the successes I couldn't share. All the failures I couldn't mourn with family. Maybe, I said. Earn it. He left without another word. I watched from the window as he walked to his car. A beat-up sedan that reminded me of what I'd driven when he kicked me out. He sat there for a long moment before driving away. My phone buzzed. A text from Mom. Carlos told me what happened. I'm so proud of you. For your success, yes, but more for your grace. You're a better person than we deserved. I didn't reply. Grace was easy when you'd already won. The hard part had been the years in between. The nights when his words echoed in my empty food truck, when worthless felt like a prophecy I was fighting to disprove. But I'd built something from that pain. Not just a restaurant chain, but a philosophy. Everyone has worth, everyone deserves chances, everyone can rise with the right support. My father had kicked me out for being worthless. 5 years later, he handed me my order through the window of my restaurant chain. I'd offered him a chance at management not out of cruelty, but out of hope. Because the best revenge isn't watching your enemies suffer. It's becoming someone who can offer them the compassion they never showed you. It's building something so good that even those who doubted you want to be part of it. Get out, you worthless waste, he'd screamed 5 years ago. Now he worked for the waste he'd discarded, serving food at the empire built by worthlessness. And when he'd cried at that drive-through window, they weren't just tears of shame. They were tears of recognition. Finally seeing the worth he'd been too blind to notice. Finally understanding that the only worthless thing had been his vision of success. I picked up my Mediterranean bowl, cold now but still good. The first bite tasted like vindication. The second tasted like forgiveness. The third just tasted like a really good meal, made by people who were paid fairly and treated well. Maybe that was the best revenge of all, building something good in a world that expected you to fail. Proving that worth isn't determined by those who can't see it, but by those who create it. My father would work his shifts, serve his customers, and maybe, just maybe, learn what I'd known all along. That worth isn't inherited or bestowed. It's earned one sunrise at a time. And if he worked hard enough, showed enough growth, proved enough change, maybe one day he'd earn that manager position. And maybe eventually that coffee. But first, he'd have to prove he was worthy of the daughter he'd thrown away. The same daughter who now signed his paychecks. Funny how drive-through windows can become windows of opportunity for those humble enough to take orders from their former failures. Thanks for watching. See you again in the next video. Stay stunned.
The autumn in Boston was chilly, with red-leaved trees swaying in the wind. Margaret Cooper parked her luxury car in front of her parents' mansion and gently called to her daughter Emma, who was dozing in the passenger seat. "Emma, we're here. This is Grandma and Grandpa's house." 10-year-old Emma looked up at the solid stone house while rubbing her eyes. "Mom, how long are we staying today?" "Until Thanksgiving is over." "We're planning to stay for 3 days," Margaret answered, gently stroking her daughter's hair. She inwardly let out a deep sigh. Though she had long been distanced from her parents and their lifestyle, as the CEO of the food company, Cooper's Classics, that they had founded, she felt obligated to make an appearance at family gatherings. The front door opened, and Margaret's sister Vanessa appeared. She was dressed in expensive designer clothes with perfect makeup. "Margaret, Emma. You've finally arrived." Vanessa greeted them with a broad smile. Margaret sensed the dissatisfaction hidden behind that smile but said nothing. "Vanessa, you look well," Margaret gave a formal greeting. In the living room, Harold and Judith were sitting on the sofa in front of the fireplace. Harold's posture was still full of dignity. As the key figure who had grown Cooper's Classics from a small local food company into a national brand, he still had a hand in important decisions as the honorary chairman of the company. "Hello, Margaret. How's work going?" Harold's voice always included an evaluation regarding business. "It's going well, Dad. Third-quarter sales increased by 15% compared to last year," Margaret answered matter-of-factly. She had already achieved more success than her father had built. While raising her daughter as a single mother, she had worked on reforming the company's management and developing new products that aligned with modern health trends, in addition to their traditional food lines. "Emma, say hello to your grandmother," Margaret gently pushed her daughter's back. Emma stepped forward shyly. "Hello, Grandma, Grandpa." Judith embraced her granddaughter. "My, Emma, you've grown so much. How's school?" "It's fun. Science class is my favorite," Emma answered with a bit of confidence. "Science? Isn't that difficult for a girl?" Judith frowned. Margaret mentally rolled her eyes at her mother's old-fashioned values but didn't show it on her face. "Emma is at the top of her class, Mom. She's going to be a wonderful scientist someday. But it's also important to get married and have a family," Judith remarked casually. "Times have changed, Mom," Margaret quietly objected. Vanessa returned to the living room with coffee and cookies. "What are you talking about?" "Emma's future," Judith answered. "Oh, I see," Vanessa smiled and sat down next to Emma. "Emma, I have a present for you from your aunt. I'll bring it to your room later." At dinner, the family conversation shifted from superficial pleasantries to gradually touching on the company's future. Harold asked Margaret, "What's happening with the plans for the new organic food line?" "We've already entered the development phase," Margaret answered. "Actually, we've received a buyout offer from a major investor group." With those words, the atmosphere at the table froze for a moment. "Buyout?" Harold's voice lowered. "Are you planning to sell our family company?" "It's still under consideration, Dad. But it's a good offer. We can maximize the company's value, and our products will remain intact. This is the company I built from my time. Harold's voice grew stern. I can't imagine selling it to outsiders. Margaret took a deep.
Can you imagine making $10,000 a month just from YouTube, all from home? That's exactly what I did with Reddit stories. No face, no voice. Check the link in the description if you're curious.
Breath. We need to make the best decision from a business perspective. We can't judge based on emotions alone. You're always so cold, Vanessa interjected. Prioritizing profits over family tradition. Margaret gave her sister a cool look. Vanessa, you've never worked for the company. You don't have the right to speak about management decisions. But we're family, Vanessa objected. It's a family company. The dinner ended in a heavy atmosphere. Emma was keenly aware of the tension among the adults. That night, as Emma was walking down the hallway to go to the bathroom, she heard her mother talking on the phone. Yes, I'm still discussing the offer with my family. Yes, I understand. If the sale goes through, we can live much better than we do now. I can give Emma the best education. Emma quietly returned to her room. She sensed how hard her mother was working for her sake, and how isolated she was within the family. On Thanksgiving morning, Emma woke up early and quietly went downstairs to the kitchen. There, her grandmother Judith was preparing a large turkey. Good morning, Grandma, Emma said in a sleepy voice. Judith turned around, surprised. My, Emma. I didn't expect you to be up so early. Are you going to help me? Yes, I'd like to help, Emma replied. She hadn't spent much time with her grandmother before, but she wanted to improve her relationship with her mother. Well then, could you cut this celery? It's for the stuffing. Judith handed Emma a cutting board and knife. Emma began carefully cutting the celery. When will Mom wake up? Your mother always works late, so she's probably still sleeping. Judith's voice had a slight tone of reproach. She's always too busy. In my day, mothers made time for their families. Emma continued cutting the celery in silence. She felt it was wiser to maintain peace than to argue about her grandmother's old-fashioned values. The kitchen door opened, and Vanessa came in. She was already perfectly made up, wearing a cashmere sweater and designer jeans. Good morning, family chefs. Vanessa said brightly. Is there anything I can help with? Oh, Vanessa. Good morning, Judith smiled. Emma is cutting celery for us. You're going to make your special dessert, aren't you? Yes, of course. Vanessa began taking ingredients out of the refrigerator. I'm going to try a special recipe this year. Everyone will be surprised. Can I help you? Emma showed interest. No, that's okay, Vanessa answered quickly. This is a secret recipe. I want it to be a surprise. Emma tilted her head slightly at that response but didn't mind much and went back to cutting celery. Harold came into the kitchen and began making coffee. Today is a special day. We're celebrating our traditional Thanksgiving. That's right, Judith agreed. It's precious time spent together as a family. Vanessa approached her father and whispered, Papa, I want to talk to you about something later. Harold nodded and replied, let's meet in the study. Emma didn't miss this brief conversation, but she decided not to pry into adult secrets. After finishing cutting the celery, she asked, is there anything else I can help with? Let's see. Judith said thoughtfully. Would you set the table? There's special Thanksgiving tableware in the cabinet in the dining room. After Emma left the kitchen, Vanessa approached her mother. Mom, is everything going according to plan? Yes, don't worry, Judith answered softly. Everything will go well today. In the afternoon, Margaret finished a work call and entered the living room. She was wearing a black pantsuit, as if she were attending an important meeting. Good morning, everyone, she said. Is there anything I can help with? We've pretty much finished preparations, Judith answered. Since you always come late, we went ahead without you." Margaret ignored her mother's sarcasm. "Where's Emma?" "She's setting the table," Judith said. "That child is very helpful. It seems she's been well raised, even while you've been busy with work." Margaret took a deep breath. "Emma is a wonderful child. I'm proud of her." At that moment, Harold and Vanessa came out of the study. Both had serious expressions, but their faces softened when they saw Margaret. "Hello, Margaret," Harold smiled. "Let's forget about work today and enjoy time with the family." "That's my plan, Dad," Margaret replied. "Actually, I wanted to talk to you about the company." "Let's save that for later," Harold waved his hand. "Today is Thanksgiving. Business talk can wait until tomorrow." Margaret sighed at her father's dismissal but decided to avoid an argument. After lunch, the whole family gathered in the living room. Vanessa brought 2 beautifully decorated cakes from the kitchen. One was a dark chocolate cake, and the other was a layered vanilla cream cake. Both were decorated with impressive skill. "These are tonight's desserts," Vanessa proudly announced. "I made them with a special recipe." "They're lovely," Judith praised. "You're truly talented." "It's not that special," Vanessa was modest, but clearly pleased. "I made this chocolate cake especially for Margaret. I remembered that you liked chocolate." "Thank you, Vanessa." Margaret was a little surprised by her sister's unexpected kindness. "It looks delicious." "This vanilla cake is for me," Vanessa continued. "I've prepared a separate apple pie for the rest of you." Emma was looking at the cakes with interest. "How did you make them?" "That's a secret," Vanessa winked. "The recipe is a family treasure. I'll teach you when you're older." In the afternoon, Emma was reading a book in a quiet spot by the window. She was engrossed in a science book and showed little interest in the adults' conversation. Margaret occasionally glanced at her daughter, feeling proud of her strong intellectual curiosity. "Emma is really a smart child," Margaret said to Harold. "Her teachers say her understanding of science far exceeds that of other children her age." "That's wonderful," Harold said, but his interest seemed superficial. "But other talents are important for girls too. Things like social skills and domestic abilities." Margaret was about to object, but at that moment Judith called her to the kitchen to check on the turkey, and the conversation was interrupted. Emma looked up from her book and saw her grandparents and Vanessa talking quietly. They seemed to be discussing something, occasionally looking in Margaret's direction. Emma quietly closed her book and moved a little closer to them, trying to hear their conversation. "She's really cold," Vanessa's voice was audible. "Always thinking about the company, never about the family." "Margaret only thinks about herself," Harold sighed. "To think she's trying to destroy what I built." "Today everything will change," Judith's voice was full of determination. Emma stopped listening and returned to the window. She felt a pain in her chest as she sensed how her mother was perceived by the family. But what could she do? She didn't know how a little girl could face adult problems. The Thanksgiving dinner was lavish. Harold carefully carved the turkey, and the table was filled with traditional dishes: cranberry sauce, mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, and pumpkin pie. The Cooper family's Thanksgiving table seemed to embody the ideal image of a traditional American family. However, beneath the superficial cordiality, there was an indescribable tension. Margaret sensed it keenly. Her parents and Vanessa were a little more formal than usual, occasionally exchanging meaningful glances. "Let's make a toast," Harold raised his wine glass. "To the health and happiness of the family, and to the future of our company." "Cheers," everyone clinked their glasses. Emma held her glass of grape juice and imitated the adults. "The turkey is wonderful, Mom," Margaret said. "Perfect as always." "Thank you," Judith smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. "I think it's important to preserve family traditions." "Yes, it is," Margaret agreed. She tried to keep the conversation on light topics. Emma, why don't you tell Grandpa and Grandma about your science project at school? Emma began explaining about the solar system model she was working on. Harold only half listened to his granddaughter's explanation, occasionally glancing at Margaret. As the meal progressed, the conversation naturally shifted to company matters. Margaret, about the buyout you mentioned yesterday, Harold suddenly brought up. I'm against it. Our company should remain in the family. Dad, let's leave business talk for another day, Margaret said calmly. It's Thanksgiving, after all. But this is an important issue, Harold persisted. You're trying to sell off my life's work. Harold, let's discuss this later. Judith placed her hand on her husband's arm. It's time for dessert. Vanessa stood up and said, Yes, I'll go get my special dessert, and headed to the kitchen. Margaret stood up for the bathroom. I'll be right back. Emma watched her mother with concern. The tension among the adults was clearly evident to her. When Vanessa returned from the kitchen, she was carrying the 2 cakes she had shown in the morning. Both the chocolate cake and vanilla cake were beautifully decorated. Now it's time for the special dessert, Vanessa announced cheerfully. She placed the chocolate cake in front of Margaret's seat and the vanilla cake in front of her own. Margaret, I made this especially for you. Judith and Harold watched the scene with somewhat tense expressions. Judith's hands were shaking slightly, and Harold kept clearing his throat. What about the others? Emma asked. Don't worry, Vanessa laughed. There's apple pie for you, Grandpa and Grandma. She returned to the kitchen and brought out an apple pie. When Margaret returned from the bathroom, Emma felt a strange impulse. Looking at her mother's and aunt's cakes, she sensed something was off. Vanessa's behavior since morning, the adults' tension, and the words, special recipe. Everything connected in her mind. Before Margaret returned to her seat, Emma casually stood up and, saying, Let me see, approached the 2 cakes. When Vanessa looked away for a moment, Emma quickly switched her mother's chocolate cake with her aunt's vanilla cake. Emma, what are you doing? Vanessa noticed and asked. This one looks more delicious, Emma said with a gentle smile. Mom likes vanilla too, right? Margaret returned to her seat. Did something happen? Nothing, Vanessa answered with a strained smile. Emma was just looking at the cakes. Margaret sat down and looked at the vanilla cake in front of her. Wait, wasn't mine chocolate? Emma switched them, Vanessa said lightly, but there was tension in her voice. Should I switch them back? No, this is fine, Margaret smiled. I like vanilla too. Emma was relieved by her mother's reaction, but Vanessa's expression showed distress. Judith and Harold also exchanged anxious glances. Well, let's eat, Harold raised his voice. Vanessa, your desserts are always wonderful. Vanessa hesitated. Yes. She took a fork and took a bite of the chocolate cake in front of her. In that moment, her expression changed completely. Vanessa suddenly began coughing and dropped her fork. Her face turned red, and her breathing became rough. Vanessa. Judith called out worriedly. Instead of answering, Vanessa coughed more violently and eventually fell to the floor, sliding off her chair. She began to convulse, gasping painfully. Vanessa! Harold shouted and rushed to his daughter. The whole room fell silent with shock. Margaret was stunned for a moment but quickly stood up and called out, "Call an ambulance." She knelt beside Vanessa and supported her head. Judith was in a state of panic as she headed for the phone. What should I do? What should I do? She said, taking out her cell phone with trembling hands. Emma stood frozen. Her eyes were wide open, with fear and understanding crossing in them. She had instinctively sensed something and switched the cakes. And that instinct had been right. Breathe, Vanessa, Margaret spoke to her sister. The ambulance will be here soon. Harold gripped Vanessa's hand and pleaded, "Hang in there, daughter." His voice was trembling with fear. Emma slowly approached her paternal grandparents. "Grandpa. Grandma," she said in a small voice. "What was in that cake?" Harold and Judith stared at their granddaughter, at a loss for words. Their expressions showed fear and guilt. The sound of ambulance sirens began to be heard in the distance. Margaret, while continuing first aid for Vanessa, ordered Emma to go to your room and wait. Emma walked up the stairs with trembling legs and headed to her room. The ambulance lights, visible from the window, were flashing red in the twilight sky. She sat on the bed, trembling, and held her pillow tightly. The hospital corridor smelled of disinfectant, and the fluorescent lights felt cold and white. Margaret sat in a hard plastic chair, holding a cup of coffee, staring straight ahead. 12 hours had passed since last night's incident. Vanessa had survived and was now resting in a private room. Harold and Judith had been at the hospital all night but had temporarily returned home in the morning to get a change of clothes. Emma had been left with a friend. Margaret needed time to think alone. According to the doctor's explanation, Vanessa had reacted to some kind of poison and gone into anaphylactic shock. The police had begun investigating the ingredients detected in the cake. In Margaret's mind, fragments of last night's events kept coming back: the moment Emma switched the cakes, Vanessa's abnormal reaction, and the police officer's questions. "Ms. Cooper." A nurse appeared in the hallway. "Your sister is awake. She's in a condition to talk. If you wish, you can visit her for a short time." Margaret nodded and placed her coffee cup on the side table. "Thank you." When she entered Vanessa's hospital room, her sister was lying in bed. Her complexion was poor, and an amphora was attached to her arm. When she saw Margaret coming in, Vanessa's expression momentarily stiffened. "Vanessa," Margaret quietly called out. "How are you?" "A little better." Vanessa gave her sister a cold look. "Why are you here? Are you satisfied that you ruined the plan?" Margaret frowned. "What are you talking about? I was really worried when you collapsed." "Liar," Vanessa's voice was hoarse but full of anger. "You take everything away. Father's company, father's affection, and now." She cut off her words. "Vanessa, what are you talking about?" Margaret was confused but beginning to sense that there was a serious issue between the sisters. "Don't pretend you don't know," Vanessa said bitterly. "You've always ruined my life. Our parents have always been proud of you. Talented Margaret, smart Margaret. I could only watch from the shadows." "That's not true," Margaret objected. "Our parents have always doted on you. Especially Dad. But they gave the company to you." Tears welled up in Vanessa's eyes. "That's what I really wanted." "You never said you wanted to work at the company," Margaret said quietly. "I did say it." Vanessa's voice rose. "I said it many times. But Dad said, business isn't for you. He said, Margaret is a natural-born leader." Margaret was speechless. She truly hadn't known about such conversations. "And now, you're trying to sell it all off," Vanessa continued. Perhaps due to the medication, she was more emotional than usual. "Our legacy, Father's life's work. So, you." A terrible thought crossed Margaret's mind. "What did you put in the cake, Vanessa?" At that moment, the door to the hospital room opened, and Harold and Judith came in. They looked surprised to see Margaret. "Margaret." Judith faltered. Margaret stood up. "I was just talking with Vanessa. She was telling me some interesting things." "Vanessa, that's enough," Harold said in a stern voice. "The doctor said you should rest." "What did she tell you?" Judith asked Vanessa. There was fear in her voice. "Mom, why?" Vanessa's voice trembled. "The plan failed. We." "Be quiet," Judith suddenly shouted. "You're confused because of the medication. Margaret looked back and forth between her parents and Vanessa. A terrible truth was beginning to take shape in her mind. Plan? Margaret calmly asked. What plan? It's nothing, Judith said quickly. Vanessa is confused. It was an accident, just an accident. No, Mom, Margaret said quietly but firmly. It wasn't an accident. What was in the chocolate cake? The cake I would have eaten if Emma hadn't switched them. Silence dominated the room. Harold looked toward the window, and Judith grabbed the back of a chair with trembling hands. We just wanted to. Vanessa opened her mouth. We just wanted to protect the company. Margaret's body trembled with fury and fear. She left the hospital room and approached the police officer standing in the hallway. I need to talk to you, she said. I believe my life was in danger. That afternoon, the police searched the Cooper mansion. From Vanessa's laptop, they found a document detailing the family's plan. The document outlined a plan to permanently eliminate Margaret, position Emma as a manageable successor, and maintain control of the company. After giving a statement at the police station, Margaret went to pick up Emma from her friend's house and decided to stay at a hotel with her. In the hotel room, Margaret was finally alone with Emma. She sat her daughter on the bed and sat down beside her. Emma, she gently called. There's something I want to ask you. Emma looked at her mother nervously. Yesterday, why did you switch the cakes? Margaret asked directly. Emma was silent for a few seconds, but finally took a deep breath and began to speak. I wanted to protect Mom, her voice was small but clear. While preparing for Thanksgiving, when I tried to charge my phone in Aunt's room, I accidentally found a medicine bottle that had fallen from her bag. When I looked up the name of the medicine on the internet, I found out it was a dangerous ingredient. Margaret gasped at her daughter's story. Then, I saw Aunt sprinkling white powder on the cake, Emma continued. Grandpa and Grandma also seemed to be hiding something. And since she said only your cake was special. You understood everything, Margaret held her daughter's hand. I didn't know, but I felt it, Emma began to cry. I just wanted to protect Mom. Margaret embraced her daughter with trembling hands. Tears fell from her eyes. She was overwhelmed by complex emotions, love for her brave daughter who had saved her life, and anger and sadness toward the family who had tried to kill her. You are truly a brave and smart child, Margaret said, burying her face in Emma's hair. Thank you for protecting Mom. I'm sorry, Mom, Emma sobbed. Aunt got sick. That's not your fault, Margaret said firmly. You did the right thing. Aunt just has to accept the consequences of her actions. A month later, the winter sky in Boston was covered in gray. Margaret looked out the office window while listening to her lawyer's words. Vanessa has offered a plea bargain, Arnold Page said. In exchange for testifying about her parents' involvement, she's seeking a reduced sentence. I see, Margaret answered quietly. Her expression revealed no emotion. Harold and Judith will receive harsh sentences, the lawyer continued. Even considering their age, attempted murder is a serious crime. Margaret turned her chair and looked directly at the lawyer. They are no longer my family, her voice was calm but full of determination. Please restart the company sale process. Understood, the lawyer nodded. Also, Vanessa wants me to give you an apology letter. Margaret shook her head. Not necessary. The past is the past. We're moving forward. After the lawyer left, Margaret called her daughter's school. I'd like to speak with Emma Cooper. I want to pick her up early today. An hour later, Margaret and Emma were driving through a suburban residential area. Margaret had an appointment with a real estate agent to look for a new house. Mom, are we leaving Boston? Emma asked. Yes, Margaret smiled. We need a fresh start. The company is being sold, and we need a new home. But what about school? My friends? "I've found a lovely new school. It has an excellent science program, perfect for you." Margaret lightly embraced her daughter's shoulder. Change is scary, but sometimes necessary. That evening on the news, Margaret learned that Harold had suffered a heart attack in prison and been hospitalized. Judith had mentally collapsed and been placed in a psychiatric facility. Vanessa was suffering from loneliness in prison. Margaret turned off the television and gazed out the window. There was sadness in her heart, but she also felt a strange sense of liberation. When spring came, Margaret and Emma moved into a new house in the suburbs. The company had been successfully sold, and they began a financially comfortable life. Margaret started a small consulting firm and decided to work at her own pace. On a warm day in May, they held a barbecue party in the garden of their new home. New neighbors and Margaret's friends gathered, and the garden was filled with laughter. "Mom," Emma pulled Margaret's arm. "I think I want to become a doctor when I grow up. I want a job where I can help people." Margaret looked at her daughter, her chest filled with pride. "That's wonderful, Emma. You'll make an excellent doctor." She hugged her daughter. Family isn't necessarily about blood ties. The people who cherish and protect each other are the real family. "The two of us are the best family, aren't we, Mom?" Emma said with a smile. "Yes, Emma," Margaret replied with a smile. "We are the best family." The soft light of dusk enveloped them, gently illuminating the beginning of their new life.